faerireads, where I talk about things that make them more Hi, and welcome to faerireads, where I talk about things that make the mundane more magical, namely books. Today we're talking about the books I read in the month of May, so this is my May wrap-up. It's a little later than ideally I would have liked it to be. We're in the middle of June now. It's June 15th actually when I'm filming this, which happens to be my birthday, so that's how wild my birthday in quarantine is. I'm sitting down and filming, talking to a camera about books. But I got my boba tea, so this is my current obsession. So this was my little birthday treat. And I like filming. Filming is the fun part. I'll save the editing for later. Editing is the real chore, so I can do that on a day that's not my birthday. But I'm happy to sit down and talk about the books I've read lately. So we're going to start with the first book that I read in May, which was The 10th Girl by Sara. This is about this school in Argentina, like the very tip of Argentina, where it's like frozen tundra basically. And there's this boarding school there that supposedly is built on cursed land, basically land that was previously inhabited by indigenous people but was taken over by settlers, and they built a boarding school there to educate, you know, upper class girls. And there's a history of bad things happening there, and we actually follow the story through two different perspectives. One is from a girl who lives during the 1970s, and her mother was part of the rebellion in Argentina. And the other's perspective is more modern, and it seems like a ghost that is haunting the boarding school. So you're following these two different perspectives, and you're trying to figure out what is at the bottom of all the goings on at this place. So I wanted to read this because I have a weird obsession with like boarding school. Like, it's kind of like one of those mystery tropes. Like, I love those stories that take place in a like old boarding school, and there's mystery and drama and possibly murder and just things like that. So that's really what drew me to the book. I like that it was set in Argentina too, as a Spanish-speaking country, because if you didn't know, I have mentioned it before, but I studied Spanish in college, so all the Latin American countries are of interest to me in that respect. I don't know a lot about Argentina, so I was hoping to learn a little bit more with this book. Unfortunately, it's not about a lot of Argentina. There is a big twist at the end, which I don't want to get into for spoiler reasons. But I will say the twist was something I didn't see coming. So in that respect, I would say it was well done. And I remember, like, as I was reading the reveal, I realized, okay, there were hints for this. They're coming back to me. And actually, one of the hints I noticed really early on, there was kind of a inconsistency. Like, there was an error that really stuck out to me. And I was like, hold on, I need to like Google this and make sure, because I'm pretty sure this is inaccurate and I need to double check. But I was reading late at night, and I had my phone shut off in the overnight hours, and so I was too lazy to like, you know, unlock my phone to like research and verify the error. So I just let it go, and I was like, maybe I'm misremembering things, but it was actually a big clue to the twist. So if I had probably investigated that more, maybe I would have seen the twist coming more. But I enjoyed it. I really liked her writing style. There were things about it that just like flowed, and there was humor that I appreciated. But reading some of the Goodreads reviews, I realized some people find it problematic in the way that it represents the indigenous people, and, you know, just falling into the trope of their indigenous people cursing white people and cursing land, and, you know, white people being afraid of indigenous people because they're going to put a curse or something on them. And I understand that. That's a valid criticism, I would say. I will say that it is explained by the twist. I think the twist kind of explains why there was such a unrealistic representation of people. I will say, from my perspective, there were a lot of lines that were anti-colorism. Like the girl, I've already forgotten her name. Mavi, is that her name? The girl's mother is telling her how being dark is beautiful, being brown is beautiful. I would say the overall message of the book was still very anti-colorism. The story definitely has some flaws, but I think it is important to consider that the author is an Argentine American, so I don't believe she was born in Argentina, but that is part of her heritage and her culture. And so given that I'm not part of that culture, I feel like I'm not the best judge to say whether it's positive representation or not, but just as a story, I enjoyed the ride that it took me on. And for that reason, I gave it 4 stars. I think she has a book coming out, another book coming out in the fall, and so hopefully, given that this was her first book, she will, you know, take her critiques into consideration in her future writing, and I'd be interested in reading more from her. I should also say it's a pretty dark book, so definitely look into the trigger warnings. I would say, again, this was the very first book that I finished, so this was a while ago that I read this, but there's definitely things alluded to. I don't know if things are explicitly described, but there's a lot of abuse that's alluded to and kind of hinted at. And it's a horror book. There's a lot of gross descriptions and really disturbing scenes. So reader beware. The next book I read was Upright Women Wanted by Sara Gailey. This is a Western set in a sort of fascist regime that's probably some post-apocalyptic form of America. And in this regime, there's this library that distributes state-sanctioned material, and librarians are only women. And we follow our protagonist is someone who has kind of been shunned from her community because of same-sex attraction, and she encounters the librarians and she'd always admired them, and she kind of goes on a journey with them. I really enjoyed it, especially for the positive LGBTQI plus representation. Well, I guess I should really say L. It's just L representation in the book. But I enjoyed it for that reason, but it wasn't really short, which was good in that I finished it really quickly and I felt very accomplished, but it does leave you wanting a little bit more from the story. So hopefully maybe there will be sequels. I'm not sure if that's been announced or not, but I would definitely be interested if there are. I gave Upright Women Wanted 3 stars. The next book I finished was Operation Paperclip, which I got on audio, so I listened to it. And this is nonfiction about the government program in America to admit Nazis into our country, kind of covertly. And it was basically an attempt to boost our own military strength against the Russians. We were scared that the Russians would take some of these former Nazis under their wing, and we were afraid that their knowledge would be used against us. But that is the justification, essentially, boiling it down a lot. So I heard about this. Well, I didn't really even know about Operation Paperclip until I watched the Amazon series Hunters, where they hunt Nazis that are living in America. And so after watching the show, I really wanted to know what is true, what was embellished for the show. And the book was really dense, and I really hate listening to dense nonfiction on audio because I feel like I don't really retain a whole lot. But I am glad I listened to it. I feel more knowledgeable than the average person on these things. but I do remember that all the Nazis were men that they talked about, because in the show, one of the Nazis that they hunt down is a woman. And so I remembered, and she was like working in NASA or something, so I wanted to know, like, did that really happen, that particular instance? And I think there were some involved with NASA in some way, but all the Nazis, at least discussed in this book, were male. So that was one discrepancy, one difference that the show decided to take. But I gave it 3 stars. Can't really say I enjoyed it, but I'm glad that I read it. The next book I finished was another audiobook, so I listened to it, and it's Dear Girls by Ali Wong. Ali Wong is a famous comedian. She has, I think, 2 Netflix specials now. She really got famous for Baby Cobra, which I know I've seen Baby Cobra. I don't know if I've seen the other one. I believe she was involved with Crazy Rich Asians. That's what I'm thinking. I think she was involved with Crazy Rich Asians as well, and I think she also wrote on the show Fresh Off the Boat, which I enjoyed. I haven't seen it in a long time, but I really enjoyed the first season of that. So I already knew I really enjoyed her sense of humor, so I wanted to listen to her memoir. And it is a memoir about her, but it's written in, what is the word? It's an epistolary novel, or epistolary memoir, I guess. So it's written in letter form to her 2 daughters. And it was really good. I gave it 4 stars. It was really funny, of course, being from Ali. But, and of course, she keeps it really real. If you've watched her special, you know she's not afraid to talk about the bodily functions and the more like grotesque parts of humanity. But she does it in a very lighthearted way. But she also does address, you know, what it was like growing up and being an Asian in America, and all the issues that brought into her life, and even bringing up her parents are from different countries, and how, you know, I think her dad was Chinese, and he was very proud to be Chinese, and sort of thought China was better than all the other, was superior to other Asian countries, while her mom was from Vietnam. And so there was that kind of conflict between her parents. I just really liked it. I gave it 3 stars. So part of why I chose to read Dear Girls was I was loosely participating in the Asian readathon. I didn't fully commit to it because I'm also a library reader, and I had titles that were previously on hold and I didn't want to cancel them. So I was going to try to prioritize books by Asian authors as much as I could. So that's why I listened to Ali Wong, and then after that I was recommended Mistranslations by Sopan. Sopan is a journalist, but he also kind of moonlights as a comedian. And so he tells his story. It's a memoir about his experience growing up in America and being a child of immigrants. He is of Indian descent. His parents immigrated from India. And he brings the journalistic integrity to the story, but also, you know, being a comedian, he brings moments of levity and humor. And the story is basically about his relationship with his parents. He grew up with a pretty fraught relationship with his parents, so it's sort of his journey to understand them better and kind of mend their relationships now that he's an adult. So I really enjoyed it. It was very heartfelt. Also, his fiance, I think they're fiancés in the book. I don't know that they ever got married. Yeah. His fiance is from Arkansas. So it was nice to have like a little Arkansas shout out and it not be something super negative. I don't think they really have ties here anymore, but she was born here, so it was nice to hear, to feel like seen and, you know, have a shout out for a minute. The next book I finished was yet another audiobook. It was a good month for audiobooks apparently, but it was Nobody Cares by A.N.T. Donahue. And Donahue is another writer who's pretty big online. It's basically a series of essays. it's like a memoir. She talks a lot about her experience growing up, leaving her small town. She is Canadian, so it was interesting to sort of hear a slightly different perspective than my own. But she talks about growing up, and she talks about growing up in the Catholic Church, which I thought her conversation about that was really interesting. She talks about what it's like moving into this big city and trying to get by as a big city. But really what stuck out to me was, I forget the title of the chapter, but in one chapter she talks about anxiety. Well, she talks about it throughout the book, her experience with anxiety, but she cites a statistic at some point in the book, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's basically no one spends more than 6 or 7 minutes thinking about what someone else has done. And if they do spend more time than that, it has to be something really, really egregious, like, you know, committing a felony or something terrible. So that was something that I really took to heart, because I do have a little bit of anxiety issues, and especially now that I've started posting things online and being more active online, I tend to overthink things and, you know, just constantly wondering if I'm making the right decision and how people will, you know, interpret my actions. And I just have to remind myself, like Anne says, nobody cares. Nobody really cares that much. The only one making a big deal about it is me. So I really appreciated that discussion and her learning about her experiences, and it was funny, and it was overall a really good read. So I gave it 4 stars. The last book I finished in May was one that I had on hold, so I kind of had to take a step back from my Asian readathon because I really wanted to finish this book. So I knew it would be a popular book, and I knew that there would be other people in line waiting for the library copies, so I really wanted to finish this one. And it's Ruthless Gods by Emily A. Duncan. So this is a sequel in a YA fantasy series. I think I read the first one back in February, maybe. But I really enjoyed it. It's set in a magical world that's very Russian inspired, very Slavic folklore influenced. But there's basically 2 countries at war with each other. One country is more religious, and they have relationship with the gods, and our main character, our protagonist, the girl, has this ability to communicate with the gods. And the other country that they're at war with is more secular. They have cut themselves off from the gods, and they, instead of relying on the gods' power, they develop magic of their own, and they rely a lot on blood magic, which is seen as, like, you know, sacrilegious to the other country. So they're basically this country at war, and we're following the events of the first novel. The first novel ended on a pretty big cliffhanger, so I was really eager to see what happened next. I struggled at the beginning with, like, understanding the characters' motivations and why they were doing what they were doing. But as I, like, pushed through that, I really got more and more invested in the story, and it had a really good ending. I was really impacted by the ending, and I'm eager to find out what happens next. So that was the end of my reading month. After reading Ruthless Gods, I kind of petered out on reading, because toward the end of the month, certain goings on in our country and around the world were kind of distracting me, and I felt like I had more important things to do with my time. But all things considered, I think it was a pretty good reading month. So thank you for watching. I'd love to hear about what you've been reading, or if you have any comments on any of the books that I'd mentioned, I'd love to chat with you down below. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Bye.